The mysterious encounter. The spaceship hummed softly as it floated through the darkness of space. Inside, in the storage bay, a small figure hid behind a stack of metal crates. Lyra's three violet eyes were wide with fear. Her small body trembled as she wrapped her thin arms around her knees. Her pale blue skin shimmered slightly in the dim light. The footsteps came again, heavy, slow, and deep. The metal floor vibrated under each step. Lyra's heart raced. She didn't know who it was, but the footsteps sounded like a giant. She pressed herself tighter into the shadows. The footsteps stopped. "Come out, little one," a soft voice called. It was a human voice, calm, gentle, but Lyra didn't trust it. She had heard about humans. They were strong, fast, and dangerous. Her mother always warned her about them before the pirates came. Lyra stayed hidden. A figure stepped around the crates. It was a human woman with short brown hair and kind, tired eyes. The woman knelt down, hands open, and smiled softly. "It's okay," the woman said. "You're safe here. My name is Captain Jane Connor. What's yours?" Lyra didn't answer. She bit her lip and stayed as still as she could. Behind Jane, another sound came. Heavy, deep. Lyra's eyes darted to the doorway. There stood the giant. He was massive, taller than any creature she had ever seen. His armor was dark, scratched from countless battles. His helmet, with its glowing red visor, made him look like a nightmare. Lyra froze in fear. Her breath caught in her throat. Jane noticed and gave a soft laugh. "Relax," she said. "He's just a gentle giant." Lyra didn't believe her. The giant was too big, too strong. No giant could be gentle. The armored figure stepped forward. The floor groaned under his weight. He crouched low, removing his helmet with a hiss of air. Under the helmet was a human face, scared and hard, but with soft, gray eyes. The giant tilted his head slightly and smiled. His voice was low but gentle. "I am Torik," he said. "I protect. I never harm." Lyra didn't move. She wanted to believe him, but fear whispered in her mind. What if it's a trick? What if he hurts me like the pirates did? Jane spoke again. "We found you in that old cargo pod. You've had a rough time, haven't you?" Her voice was warm, understanding. "We're not here to hurt you, Lyra. We just want to help." Lyra's eyes widened. How do you know my name?" she whispered. Jane smiled softly. "Your emergency tag on your necklace." She pointed at the small silver pendant around Lyra's neck. "It told us your name and that you're from the colony of Vexor 3. Lyra's stomach dropped. "Vexor 3 is gone," she said, voice trembling. "I know," Jane said, sadness filling her eyes. "Pirates destroyed it." She hesitated. "But you survived. And we're here now. You're not alone anymore." Tears filled Lyra's eyes. The memory of screaming, of fire and blaster shots, of her parents telling her to hide in the cargo pod. It all rushed back. She rubbed her eyes quickly and looked at Torik. The giant hadn't moved. He stayed still, giving her space. "Pirates are bad," Lyra whispered. "They are," Torik said softly. "And I stop bad people." Lyra looked at him closely. His scars, his big hands, his massive size. They all spoke of danger. But his eyes were gentle. Her tiny voice broke the silence. "Promise." Torik put his big hand over his heart. "I promise." Jane stood up and held out her hand. "Come on. Let's get you cleaned up and something warm to eat." Lyra hesitated, then slowly reached out. Jane's hand was warm and steady. As they turned to walk out of the storage bay, Lyra cast one more glance at Torik. The giant followed them, his footsteps heavy but careful. Later that night, Lyra sat in a small, cozy cabin with a warm blanket around her. A bowl of soup sat untouched on the table. She couldn't stop thinking about the pirates. What if they were still looking for her? What if they found her here? Her small hand touched the silver necklace her mother gave her. It was warm against her skin. Outside, Torek sat on a metal bench in the hallway. His helmet rested on his knee. His eyes stayed on the door. Jane walked by and stopped. "You don't have to sit here all night, Torek." Torek shook his head. "I promised." Inside the cabin, Lyra finally closed her eyes. The ship hummed softly. The footsteps of the giant no longer frightened her. Instead, they felt like a shield around her, a giant wall of safety. But deep in space, beyond the safety of the ship, a signal pulsed from the remains of Lyra's cargo pod. A pirate ship intercepted it. A sharp voice crackled through the darkness. "The girl is alive. Track her. The bounty still stands." The gentle giants passed. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the ship's observation window, their cold light reflecting softly across Lyra's pale blue skin. She sat curled on the padded bench, staring into the vast darkness. Space used to feel safe, like a quiet blanket where no one could find her. Now it felt like a cold, empty place where danger waited just beyond the shadows. Her fingers clutched the silver necklace around her neck. It was the last gift from her mother, the only piece of home she had left. The door to the observation deck opened with a faint hiss. Heavy footsteps followed. Lyra tensed at the sound. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Only one person moved like that, like a walking mountain. Torek stopped a few feet away. He didn't sit. He didn't speak. He simply stood there, like an ancient statue, watching the stars alongside her. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. After several minutes, Lyra asked softly, "Why do you walk so loud?" Torek's lips twitched in a small smile. "I don't try to walk loud," he said, voice deep but gentle. "I try to walk soft. But I was made heavy." Lyra tilted her head. "Made?" "Yes." He hesitated. "Humans made me stronger, bigger, and tougher than normal. I'm part of a program called the Titan Initiative, a project from long ago." "Why?" "Because humans feared the dark." Lyra shivered at those words. The dark was more than just shadows. The dark was pirates and monsters, empty voids and silent, broken colonies. "Like the pirates?" she asked. Torek nodded slowly. "A long time ago, dangerous enemies came from the edges of space. Pirates, slavers, warlords, things worse than nightmares. Humanity needed protectors, so they made us." Lyra stared at his massive hands, scared and rough. "And you fight." "I protect," Torek corrected softly. "Fighting is only part of it." The door opened again, and Captain Jane Connor stepped inside. Her eyes moved from Lyra to Torek, then to the stars. "Can't sleep?" she asked Lyra. Lyra shook her head. Jane gave a small sigh and sat on the bench beside her. "Nightmares?" "Not really," Lyra said. "Just the pirates. I know they're out there. I can feel them." Jane exchanged a glance with Torek. The big man's jaw tightened slightly. "You're safe here," Jane said, her voice steady. "Our ship has shields, weapons, and one very big human who's really good at smashing bad guys." Torek gave a soft chuckle, which sounded like distant thunder. "Very good at smashing," he agreed. Lyra gave a tiny smile, but it didn't last. The fear lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. "What if they find me?" she whispered. Torek's gray eyes softened. He knelt beside the bench, lowering himself so their eyes were level. "If they come," he said, voice low and firm, "I will stop them, no matter what." Lyra's heart wanted to believe him, but memories of the burning colony haunted her. "The pirates always find you. They never stop." The signal. In the dark void beyond the ship, a small invisible pulse of energy drifted across space. It came from the damaged cargo pod where Lyra had once hidden. The pirates had found the pod hours ago, and now their scanners locked onto the ship's ion trail. On board the pirate command ship Black Fang, Captain Drek Thavos leaned over the glowing red console. His reptilian eyes narrowed. "The girl survived," he hissed. "The bounty stands. Follow them." His crew obeyed. Engines roared. The hunt was on. The past unveiled. Back on the human ship, Lyra sat beside Jane in the command center. Torek stood near the doorway, arms crossed, helmet clipped to his belt. The screen showed only peaceful stars, but Lyra's stomach churned. "Who are the pirates?" Lyra asked. "Why do they want me?" Jane's smile faded. She opened a screen, pulling up a file. A face appeared. Captain Drek Thavos. His scaly skin was grayish-green, eyes like yellow slits, mouth filled with needle-sharp teeth. "That's him," Lyra whispered, voice trembling. "The one who took my home." Jane nodded grimly. "His group is called the Void Syndicate. They attack colonies, steal resources, and—" She hesitated. "Take people." "Why me?" Jane hesitated again. "We don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." Lyra felt the cold fear return. Her hands gripped the necklace. "Why me?" Torek spoke from the shadows. "They want the necklace," he said. Jane turned sharply. "What?" "The metal," Torek said, stepping closer. "It's not just a trinket. The design matches ancient tech. Military-grade encryption." Jane's face paled. "You mean a data key?" Torek nodded. "A map, maybe. A key to something important." He looked at Lyra. "Your parents gave it to you to keep it safe." Lyra's chest tightened. The necklace was warm against her skin. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Never take it off, sweetheart. It will guide you when the stars grow cold." Jane cursed softly. "If the syndicate wants it, they'll come in force." She stood and opened the comm. Ray shields, double sensor suites. Torek turned to Lyra. "Come," he said. "We'll go to the Safa room." Lyra slipped off the bench and took his hand without thinking. The massive calloused fingers closed around her tiny hand like a protective cage. As they left the command center, alarms blared. Jane's voice crackled over the speakers. "Enemy ship detected. It's the Black Fang. They found us." Torek's eyes turned hard. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "It begins." The chase through the alien bazaar. The spaceship's alarms screamed through the corridors, echoing like a metallic heartbeat. Lyra's chest tightened as she clung to Torek's massive hand. His grip was firm, steady, like holding onto a stone wall during a storm. Behind them, Captain Jane's voice crackled over the intercom. "Shields holding at 60%. Enemy ship closing fast. Evade and prepare countermeasures." Torek didn't slow his stride. His footsteps pounded the floor like drumbeats of war. Lyra's heart raced with each step. "Where are we going?" she gasped. "Escape plan," Torek said. "We can't fight them in space. We need to hide." The corridor lights turned crimson. The ship shook violently, knocking Lyra off her feet. Torek caught her mid-fall and lifted her easily into his arms. His face remained calm, but his eyes, they had turned sharp and cold. "Docking clamps secured," said the ship's eye. "Landing on Ilara Prime in 3 minutes." "Why Ilara Prime?" Lyra asked, voice shaky. "Big city. Busy spaceport. Good place to hide," Torek said. He carried her toward a side hatch. "We'll lose them in the crowd." "Won't they find us?" "Not if we move fast." The ship jolted again. Torek's armor clanked as he braced against the wall. Outside, through a small window, Lyra saw the pirate ship, Black Fang. It loomed like a metal predator, sleek and deadly, with jagged wings and glowing red cannons. "They're coming," she whispered. Torek didn't answer. His jaw tightened. The descent. The ship shuddered as it entered Ilara Prime's atmosphere. Flames licked the edges of the hull. Outside, the city glimmered like a sea of stars. A massive, bustling metropolis with floating markets, neon-lit towers, and thick fog curling through the streets. The ship docked with a metallic thud. The hatch hissed open. Torek stepped out, holding Lyra close. The air smelled sharp, like burnt metal mixed with strange spices. The sounds of countless voices filled the air. Humans, aliens, machines, all speaking at once. "Keep your hood up," Torek instructed, lowering her onto the ground. "Stay close. If I say run, you run. No questions." Lyra nodded. She pulled the dark hood of her jacket over her head, hiding her violet eyes and pale skin. Her heart pounded in her chest. Torek's hand hovered protectively near her shoulder. The marketplace stretched before them, an endless maze of stalls, holographic signs, and creatures from 100 worlds. Vendors shouted about rare crystals, alien fruits, and handcrafted relics. Floating security drones buzzed through the air. Torek moved with purpose, weaving through the crowd. Lyra followed, keeping her small hand clenched around the silver necklace beneath her jacket. Behind them, 2 shadowy figures emerged from the docking bay. They wore black armor with red skull emblems on their chests. One sniffed the air and pointed toward the crowd. "Target acquired," the pirate hissed. "The chase begins." Torek's senses sharpened. The back of his neck tingled, a warrior's instinct. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the 2 pirates pushing through the crowd. "They found us," he said quietly. Lyra's eyes widened. "What do we do?" "Run." They bolted. Torek moved like a tank through the crowd, his massive size parting people like water. Lyra sprinted beside him, legs burning with effort. Behind them, the pirates shoved civilians aside, knocking over stalls and crates. Blaster fire cracked through the air. The crowd screamed and scattered. "Left," Torek barked. Lyra followed him down a narrow alley lined with glowing pipes and steam vents. The ground was slick beneath her feet. She slipped, but Torek caught her wrist and pulled her up without stopping. The pirates turned into the alley seconds later. One raised a communicator. "Alpha Team to Black Fang," he hissed. "Target located. Send aerial drones." The drone swarm. Above the city, the Black Fang deployed 4 sleek, black drones. They dropped through the clouds like silent falcons, red sensors sweeping the streets. Torek saw their shadows flicker overhead. "Underground," he muttered. He yanked open a maintenance hatch in the alley floor. The ladder led into darkness. "Go, Lyra," he ordered. She hesitated, hearing the distant whine of drone engines. "Now." Lyra climbed down. Torek followed, pulling the hatch shut just as red beams swept past. The tunnels were damp and cold. Pipes hissed with steam, and distant machinery rumbled like a sleeping beast. Torek switched on a small wrist light, guiding the way. "Where are we?" Lyra whispered. "Old water tunnels," Torek said. "They lead to the spaceport's lower levels." "Will the drones find us?" "Not easily." The sound of metal scraping above made them both freeze. Footsteps echoed from the ladder. "They're coming," Lyra whispered. Torek raised his wrist communicator. "Jane, come in." Static. "Jane, enemy ground forces active. We need extraction." "Sector 9 tunnels." More static. Then Jane's voice broke through. "Acknowledged. Hold position. I'm sending an extraction drone." "Good," Torek said. He knelt beside Lyra. "Listen, we'll fight if we have to, but you must stay behind me." "Understand." Lyra nodded, clutching her necklace. The footsteps drew closer. Then came the voice, cold and sharp. "Little girl," it called, "we know you're here. No more running. Come out, and we won't hurt you." Lyra froze. It was the voice from the night her colony fell. The pirate captain. Torek's muscles tensed. His eyes turned hard. He shifted into a defensive stance, drawing his heavy plasma pistol. The footsteps stopped 10 meters away. In the beam of Torek's wrist light, a figure appeared, Captain Drek'Thavos. The pirate's reptilian lips curled into a grin. "Ah, the Titan," he hissed. And the girl? You can't protect her forever. Torek raised his pistol. Watch me. Thavos laughed softly and tapped his wrist. Behind him, 2 drones descended into the tunnel, red cannons glowing. Torek fired. The blast roared like thunder, hitting the first drone. It exploded in a burst of fire and metal. The second drone fired back, forcing Torek to shield Lyra. Run, Torek ordered. Lyra turned and sprinted into the darkness. She didn't look back. Her heart pounded louder than the blaster fire. Behind her, she heard Torek's roar of rage and the screech of metal tearing apart. The tunnel split ahead, left or right. Lyra hesitated, then instinctively turned left. Her necklace grew warm against her skin. It pulsed softly. The pirate's voice echoed again, closer this time. Run, little girl. We'll find you. Tears blurred Lyra's vision as she ran. She didn't know if Torek was still fighting or if he was hurt. All she knew was that the pirates were getting closer. Ahead, a faint green light flickered. The necklace pulsed stronger now, as if guiding her. She ran toward it. The light revealed a metal door. Ancient symbols glowed faintly on its surface. Lyra's necklace became hot, almost burning. The door slid open with a deep hum. Lyra rushed inside. The door sealed behind her. Silence fell. In the center of the room stood a pedestal with a holographic star map glowing above it. The necklace vibrated. The map shifted, showing unfamiliar coordinates and a name written in ancient text. Sanctuary Prime. Lyra's breath caught. This is what they want, she realized. Outside, muffled footsteps approached. She was trapped. The captain's gamble. The hidden chamber was cold and silent, except for Lyra's shallow breaths. The holographic star map floated above the pedestal, casting a faint blue glow on her pale blue skin. The coordinates glimmered like distant dreams, with the name Sanctuary Prime glowing at the center. Lyra's necklace pulsed with warmth against her chest, matching the faint hum from the pedestal. Her heart raced. The map must be important, so important that the pirates destroyed her colony for it. They're coming. The memory of the pirate captain's voice echoed in her mind. Outside the sealed door, footsteps grew louder. The cold voice returned, smooth and confident. Little girl, Captain Thavos said, his voice muffled through the thick metal. There's nowhere left to run. Lyra backed away from the pedestal. Her eyes darted around the chamber. No vents, no other exits, just the solid door separating her from the pirates. The door trembled as something heavy slammed into it. The thick metal groaned. Open the door, and we won't hurt you, Thavos said, voice mocking. We just want the necklace. Give it to us, and you can go free. Lyra's hand clutched the pendant tightly. Her mother's last words echoed in her mind. Never take it off. It will guide you when the stars grow cold. No, she couldn't give it up. The door groaned again, bending inward. Sparks sprayed from the edges as plasma torches cut into the metal. Think, Lyra. Think. Her eyes darted back to the pedestal. The star map shifted slightly, pulsing with the same rhythm as the necklace. She stepped closer, holding the pendant toward the light. The map reacted. A new holographic interface appeared with symbols she didn't recognize. The pedestal's hum grew louder. Outside, Thavos hissed in frustration. Cut faster. Lyra bit her lip and pressed the pendant into the small circular slot on the pedestal. The metal clicked, and the hologram turned red. The deep mechanical voice spoke in an ancient, unfamiliar language. The necklace's warmth vanished. The pedestal went dark. The door exploded inward. Lyra dove to the floor as shrapnel flew through the room. Heat scorched the air. Thavos stepped through the smoking doorway. His scaly skin gleamed in the dim light. His yellow eyes locked onto her. Hello, little treasure, he said softly. Lyra scrambled back, but 2 armored pirates grabbed her arms. The necklace remained locked in the pedestal. Thavos approached the pedestal, claws clicking on the floor. He ran a finger along the cold surface and growled. You locked it. His eyes snapped to Lyra. What did you do? I don't know, she said truthfully. He raised his hand, claws glinting. You're lying. The ceiling collapsed. Torek's fury. With a roar, Torek smashed through the ceiling like a meteor. His massive armored frame hit the ground with a deafening crash. The floor cracked beneath his boots, his plasma shield flared to life, and his heavy gauntlet crackled with energy. Let her go, he growled. Favos stepped back. Titan, he hissed, always showing up where you're not wanted. Torek's gaze locked on Lyra, who was still pinned by the pirates. Her eyes were wide with fear. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. Torek's jaw tightened. His voice dropped into a low, dangerous growl. You hurt her. The closest pirate raised his weapon. Torek moved faster than thought. His fist smashed into the pirate's chest, sending the armored enemy flying into the wall with a sickening crack. The second pirate shoved Lyra aside and fired his blaster. The shot hit Torek's shoulder, burning through his armor. He didn't even flinch. Torek grabbed the pirate by the helmet and slammed him into the floor. The pirate didn't get up. Lyra scrambled toward the pedestal, heart racing. The pendant still sat in the metal slot. Favos drew 2 plasma blades, their orange glow casting twisted shadows on the walls. You can't protect her forever, Titan, he sneered. The Syndicate always collects its prize. Torek's eyes narrowed. He drew his massive combat knife. Come try. The two charged. The duel. The room shook with the force of the battle. Torek swung with brutal precision, his knife flashing through the air. Favos darted around him, faster and more agile, slashing with twin blades. Sparks flew as the blades clashed. Lyra ducked behind the pedestal. Every strike sounded like thunder. The fight was terrifying yet mesmerizing. Torek fought like an ancient warrior, each move deliberate and powerful. But Favos was quick, striking like a serpent. Favos feinted left, then stabbed low. His blade cut deep into Torek's side. The big man grunted but didn't fall. You're slowing down, Titan, Favos taunted. Torek roared and tackled him. The force of the impact smashed Favos into the pedestal, cracking the surface. The star map flickered to life again. The coordinates for Sanctuary Prime pulsed in red. Favos' eyes gleamed with recognition. That's what we need, he hissed. He slammed his elbow into Torek's helmet, breaking free. The pirate captain lunged for the pedestal. Lyra's heart nearly stopped. Torek saw it too. Lyra, the necklace. She grabbed the pendant with both hands and yanked. It wouldn't budge. The symbols on the pedestal turned crimson. Favos reached out, claws extended. Torek threw his combat knife. The blade sank into Favos' shoulder with a wet thunk. The pirate howled and fell back. The pedestal emitted a deep metallic voice. Access confirmed. Data transfer initiated. Lines of light shot from the pendant, creating a massive map of the galaxy. A single star system glowed brighter than the rest. Favos' eyes widened. There it is, he breathed. Sanctuary Prime. The Syndicate will own it all. Torek didn't wait. He charged, ramming his shoulder into Favos. The pirate captain slammed into the wall. Torek pinned him there with one massive hand. You're done, Torek growled. Favos bared his teeth. No, I'm just the beginning. He tapped a device on his wrist. A distant explosion rocked the tunnels. The ceiling cracked. Torek cursed. He turned to Lyra. We need to go. Now. Lyra hesitated. The necklace. Forget it. Run. The ground shook again. Torek grabbed Lyra and sprinted toward the exit. Behind them, Favos laughed through bloody teeth. You can run, Titan, he rasped. But the Syndicate is coming. And the girl will lead us straight to Sanctuary Prime. Asterisk. The ceiling collapsed between them. The escape. Torek carried Lyra through the crumbling tunnels. Dust filled the air. Pipes burst, spraying steam. The entire underground structure was collapsing. The communicator crackled. Jane's voice. "I've got a drone above your location. Follow the beacon." A small blue light appeared ahead. Torek followed it through twisting passages. Lyra clung to him, heart hammering. They reached a rusted metal ladder leading up. Torek set Lyra down. "Climb," he ordered. Lyra scrambled upward. Torek followed, groaning as the damaged wall cracked beneath his feet. At the top, Jane's drone hovered over a narrow alley. They climbed into the open air just as the ground caved in behind them. Steam and rubble exploded into the sky. Jane's voice crackled again. "I see you. Get ready for pickup." A sleek, black shuttle descended, doors open. Jane stood inside, hand extended. Torek lifted Lyra into the shuttle, then pulled himself up. The doors shut, and the engines roared. Through the window, Lyra saw the ruins of the tunnel vanish beneath smoke and fire. She touched the empty spot where her necklace had hung. "Did we lose it?" she whispered. Jane's eyes softened. "We lost the pendant," she said gently, "but we know where it leads." Torek placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Sanctuary Prime," he said. "Whatever it is, we'll find it first." But deep inside, Torek knew one thing. The Syndicate wouldn't stop now. They'd come for the girl with everything they had. Battle of the Midnight Sky. The shuttle sliced through the night sky, engines roaring as it soared above the chaotic city of Ilara Prime. Lyra sat by the window, eyes locked on the distant flames rising from the collapsed tunnels below. The necklace was gone. The pirates had seen the map. Sanctuary Prime. The name still echoed in her mind like a forgotten dream. Torek sat across from her, helmet resting on his knee. His armor was scorched, his side bleeding through the cracks in the plating. He didn't complain. He simply watched her, his gray eyes calm despite the battle they had just survived. Jane stood at the controls, her fingers tapping furiously on the holographic dashboard. The screen showed the city behind them, glowing with lights and smoke. 2 red dots appeared on the radar. "They're following," Jane said, voice tight. Torek's gaze shifted to the screen. "How close?" 3 clicks and closing. Jane zoomed in. The dots became shapes. 2 sleek pirate gunships. Torek's jaw tightened. Void Syndicate interceptors. Fast, light, and armed to the teeth. Jane nodded grimly. "We won't outrun them. The Soul Defender is cloaked above the atmosphere, but we need 5 minutes to reach launch height." Lyra gripped the armrest. "They're coming. For me, aren't they?" Torek didn't lie. "Yes." The shuttle shook as blaster fire ripped through the air behind them. Lyra's breath caught. "What do we do?" Torek slid his helmet on. The red visor lit up. "We fight. The Sky Hunt." The pirate gunships roared closer. Their angular frames glinted in the moonlight. Red plasma beams fired from their cannons, cutting through the sky. Jane swerved hard. "Hold on," she shouted. The shuttle banked sharply left. Lyra yelped, gripping her seat as gravity slammed her sideways. Plasma shots streaked past the window, close enough to heat the glass. Torek braced himself, gripping the overhead rail. His voice remained steady. "Evasive pattern Delta 4. Force them to overshoot." Jane followed the instructions, flipping a switch. The shuttle engines cut for a split second, causing the pursuing ships to overshoot them. "Good," Torek said. He moved toward the rear of the shuttle and opened a weapons locker. Inside sat a heavy plasma repeater with a targeting interface. He lifted it effortlessly. "Lyra," he said, "come here." Her heart raced, but she obeyed. Torek knelt beside her and pointed to a small monitor connected to the rear turret. "This is a targeting system," he explained. "I need you to watch this screen. If you see a red square lock onto us, tell me immediately." "But I've never." "You can," Torek said firmly. "You're smart. Just call out when the red square appears. We're a team." Lyra swallowed hard but nodded. "Okay." Torek stepped to the rear turret and powered it on. The massive cannon swiveled and locked into place. He gripped the controls as the targeting interface appeared on his visor. The pirate gunships circled back. They adjusted their flight paths to surround the shuttle. Jane cursed. "They're trying to box us in." Torek's voice was ice. "Not today." The ambush. The pirate ships opened fire together. Plasma beams crisscrossed the sky. One shot hit the shuttle's left engine. Alarms blared. The ship lurched. "Engine damage," Jane said, gritting her teeth. "We'll lose altitude soon." Torek's turret swiveled. He squeezed the trigger. Plasma rounds fired with a deafening roar. The turret glowed red-hot as it tracked the rightmost pirate ship. The gunship banked hard to avoid the fire, but one of Torek's shots struck its left wing. The wing exploded, sending the ship spinning downward. "One down," Torek muttered. The second gunship accelerated and released a swarm of Seeker missiles. Lyra's eyes widened as red squares appeared on the monitor. "Missiles," she shouted. "Lots of them." "Brace," Jane yelled. Torek fired wildly at the missiles. The air lit up with explosions as some were destroyed. But two missiles struck the shuttle's tail. The impact knocked Lyra from her seat. Torek lunged, catching her with one arm. Smoke filled the cabin. The shuttle dropped rapidly. "We're losing altitude," Jane shouted. Torek helped Lyra to her feet. "Jane, emergency override on manual stabilizers." "I'll take the turret. We need to hit them hard." Jane cursed but obeyed. "You've got 30 seconds before we hit the ground." "That's all I need." The pirate gunship swooped in for the kill. Its cannons charged for a final shot. Torek tracked it through the smoke. His breathing slowed. The red targeting circle aligned with the enemy ship's cockpit. He fired. The plasma round hit dead center. The gunship exploded in a brilliant flash, debris scattering across the night sky. But the shuttle was already spinning toward the ground. "Hold on," Jane screamed. The shuttle hit the surface with a thunderous crash. Metal groaned. Sparks flew. The world turned into noise and chaos. The aftermath. Lyra woke to silence. The cabin was dark except for small fires flickering across the control panels. Her head throbbed. Her hands trembled as she unclipped her seatbelt. "Torek," she whispered. No answer. She crawled toward the rear of the shuttle. Torek lay sprawled on the floor, helmet cracked, armor dented. Blood seeped from a gash on his forehead. "Torek." Lyra shook him. He groaned and opened one eye. "I'm okay," he rasped. Jane's voice crackled weakly from the front. "We're alive. But the Syndicate, they won't stop." Torek pushed himself up with a grunt. He looked out the cracked window. Above them, the Black Fang loomed like a dark god descending from the heavens. "They'd brought their flagship," he said. Jane's voice turned grim. "If they get that map, thousands of worlds could fall." Torek's mind raced. "The Syndicate won't stop unless we stop them." He looked at Lyra. Her face was pale but determined. "Sanctuary Prime," he muttered. "They believe it's a lost technology vault. Weapons, resources, power." He stood with difficulty. "We can't let them get it." "But how?" Lyra asked. Torek's eyes burned beneath his cracked visor. "We go to the Black Fang. We destroy the ship and the data." Jane's eyes widened. "That's suicide." Torek glanced down at Lyra. "No, it's a gamble. And sometimes, the captain has to gamble for her crew." Lyra tightened her fists. "We'll do it together." Torek smiled faintly. "Yeah, together." The Black Fang's engines roared above them. The hunt wasn't over. The battle had just begun. The final stand. The Black Fang hung ominously above the broken landscape of Ilara Prime, its massive frame blotting out the stars. Torek's shuttle was wrecked, its engines silent, its hull cracked. Below them, the burning wreckage of the city filled the night sky with smoke and fire. The Void Syndicate had no intention of letting them escape. Torek stood near the shuttle's hatch, looking up at the looming ship. His gray eyes were fierce, determined. His armor was battered, his blood mixing with the dirt on his skin, but his resolve was unbroken. He turned to Lyra, who stood beside him, her small form filled with quiet courage. "We have to stop them," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Torek nodded. "We will." Jane, still behind them, checked her weapon, adjusting her blaster rifle. The Black Fang's engines are powering up. They're preparing to launch. She scanned the sky. "We don't have much time. They'll bring everything they got down on us once they know we're still alive." "We won't give them the chance," Torek said. "We're going to hit them before they even leave the atmosphere." The strategy. Torek and Jane studied the Black Fang through a damaged scope. They could see the small flashes of movement, pirate soldiers preparing for a ground assault, but that was not their main target. The Syndicate's true weapon was the ship's data core, the key to unlocking the secrets of Sanctuary Prime. Lyra stood silently beside them, clutching her mother's necklace. The map still lingered in her mind, the coordinates to Sanctuary Prime swirling like an unsolved puzzle. She had come so far, but the danger had only increased. Torek turned to her. "Lyra, your necklace. It's not just a key. It's more." She stared at him, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Torek's face was grim, as though the weight of the truth was finally settling. "The map, it's linked to ancient tech, old, pre-civilization tech, weapons that could destroy fleets or worlds." Lyra's stomach twisted. "So the Syndicate will stop at nothing to control it," Torek finished. "But you don't just hold the key to a vault of destruction. You hold the key to salvation." His words settled over her like a heavy blanket. Salvation. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "It will guide you when the stars grow cold." "We'll make sure they don't get it," Jane said, loading her weapon. "But we need a plan." Torek nodded. "We'll hit them where it hurts. Their engines. We destroy their engines, and they can't escape. Then we go after the data core. The infiltration." The plan was simple, but the risks were enormous. The Black Fang was heavily guarded, and every moment that passed brought them closer to a final showdown. Torek, Jane, and Lyra moved quickly, hiding in the shadows of a ruined building near the docking station, where the Syndicate's forces were assembling. Torek's massive frame was camouflaged by the darkness, his breathing steady. Jane had already hacked into the station's security systems, creating a temporary blackout to mask their movements. Lyra glanced up at Torek. "Are you sure about this?" Torek gave her a reassuring nod. "I'm sure." They crept through the wreckage, staying low and quiet. The sounds of the Black Fang's engines powering up rumbled through the ground beneath their feet. They could see the pirates' armed patrols, their red and black uniforms standing out in the haze of the destroyed city. Torek led the way, moving silently like a predator in the dark. They reached the main entrance to the Syndicate's hangar, a massive steel door guarded by two heavily armed pirates. Jane, always quick on her feet, disabled the security system with a few swift keystrokes. The door creaked open. Torek moved first, his plasma rifle raised. Jane followed, then Lyra, whose breath was shallow with nervousness. Inside, they found the hangar buzzing with activity. Pirates were loading crates of weapons into their ships, while others stood by, watching monitors. The Black Fang loomed in the distance, its massive engines glowing with power. "Get to the control room," Torek whispered. "That's where they're directing everything." Jane nodded. "I'll lead the way. Stay close." The trio moved deeper into the hangar, dodging pirate patrols and hiding behind crates. Every footstep seemed to echo. Every breath felt too loud. The tension was suffocating. They reached the control room doors. Jane cracked the code quickly and stepped inside, followed by Torek and Lyra. The control room was filled with pirate officers, busy tracking their forces on screens. Torek moved in first, taking out 2 pirates with precise shots to their helmets. The rest scrambled to reach their weapons. "Cover the exits," one officer shouted. But it was too late. Jane's blaster fired, hitting the officer's shoulder and sending him crashing to the floor. "Move," Torek ordered, sweeping the room with his rifle. They stormed to the main control terminal. Jane quickly connected her wrist pad to the system, her fingers flying over the keys. "I'm in," she said, a flicker of hope in her voice. "Disabling their engines now." Lyra's heart raced. She could feel the tension rising, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was it. They had to make their move now, or all was lost. The countdown. Outside, the Black Fang's engines rumbled, preparing to launch. Lyra looked up at Torek, fear creeping into her chest. "Are we going to make it?" Torek's eyes softened, but his voice was as steady as ever. "We will. Just stay focused." Behind them, a loud crash echoed. Pirates had found them. The control room door flew open, and the pirates poured in, guns raised. "You should have stayed out of this, Titan," one pirate sneered. Lyra turned to face the door, but Torek stepped in front of her, his massive frame blocking her from view. He gripped his plasma rifle tightly. "Get behind me," he growled. The pirates opened fire, and Torek moved like lightning, his rifle tracking every shot. The room erupted into chaos. Torek's plasma rifle hummed with power as it cut through the pirates one by one. Jane fired from behind him, her blaster expertly picking off enemies at range. Lyra ducked behind a console, praying they wouldn't find her. Torek moved like a whirlwind of destruction, taking down pirates faster than they could react. He was a machine, a force of nature. "We've got a minute," Jane shouted over the gunfire. "If we don't stop them now." "I know," Torek interrupted. He turned to Lyra. "Go to the data core. Now." Lyra hesitated, looking at him, fear and determination battling in her eyes. "But now," he ordered. "I'll cover you. Go." Lyra took off running, her legs shaking, but her resolve growing stronger. She knew what was at stake. She found the data core chamber a few moments later, its doors sliding open with a hiss. Inside, a massive terminal hummed with power. She approached it cautiously, heart racing. The map was still fresh in her mind. The sanctuary prime coordinates gleamed like a beacon. She stepped forward, her fingers trembling as she reached for the terminal. But just as she was about to touch it, a sharp pain shot through her chest. She gasped, looking down. A blaster shot had pierced her side. The gentle giant's promise. Lyra gasped, feeling the hot sting of blood seep through her side. Her hand instinctively pressed against the wound, but the pain only grew sharper. She stumbled back from the terminal, her vision blurring. The blaster shot had been fast, silent, and unforgiving. "No, I can't fall now." Her legs shook beneath her as she struggled to stay upright. She reached out for the terminal again, but her strength was failing. The blood continued to pour from the wound, staining her clothes. She could feel her life force slipping away, but there was no time to fall. The Black Fang was still preparing to launch, and the Syndicate was closer than ever to the sanctuary. "I can't die here," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. Then she heard the heavy footsteps, a familiar sound, the sound of safety, the gentle giant's rescue. Torek burst into the chamber, his eyes wide with fury. His helmet was cracked, his armor scarred from the battle outside, but it didn't matter. He saw Lyra, crumpled and bleeding, and a fire lit within him, hot, blazing fury. "Lyra," his voice was a growl of desperation. He rushed to her side, his large hands lifting her effortlessly, but gently, as if she were made of glass. Lyra blinked, struggling to keep her focus. "Torek, I failed." "You didn't fail," Torek said, his voice soft yet firm, like a promise in the midst of chaos. His hands pressed against her wound, applying pressure to stop the bleeding. "I'll never let you fail." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The words, simple yet profound, were the anchor she needed to hold on. But the syndicate, they'll not today, Torek cut in. His gaze locked with hers, his eyes fierce with the same determination that had carried him through countless battles. You're not alone. Not now. Not ever. The room shook as blaster fire continued outside. The Black Fang was almost ready to leave. The countdown had already started. Time was slipping away. But Torek wasn't worried. He wasn't leaving her behind. He never would. He gently lifted her into his arms, ignoring the sounds of the world around them, focusing only on her, the girl who had stolen his heart despite the chaos. He could hear Jane's voice crackling over the communicator. Torek, you need to get out of there. The ship's going to launch, and we can't afford to lose you both. Torek ignored her words. Lyra was his priority. Always. The battle outside. The hangar outside was a war zone. The syndicate forces were everywhere, preparing for launch, and they knew the shuttle hadn't just crashed. It was a setup. A trap to steal the map. The pirates had underestimated Torek's will to protect. He moved swiftly, his massive frame cutting through the pirate ranks. His plasma rifle sent out bursts of fire, each shot hitting its target with deadly precision. No one could stop him. Lyra's head rested on his chest, the rhythmic sound of his heartbeat grounding her in the chaos. She could barely keep her eyes open, but the warmth of his presence gave her the strength to keep breathing. Stay with me, Lyra, Torek murmured, his voice filled with both authority and tenderness. We're not done yet. Lyra nodded weakly, her fingers clutching the edge of his armor. I'm with you, Torek. The final countdown. Jane's voice came through the communicator again. We have 5 minutes before the Black Fang launches. Understood, Torek growled. We don't have much time. Lyra could hear the urgency in his tone, but she also felt the calm in his every movement, in the way he held her close but steady. His strength was unwavering, and it gave her the courage to continue the fight, even when her body screamed for rest. Torek reached the data core control panel. He had one goal in mind: destroying the Syndicate's hold on Sanctuary Prime. As his hand hovered over the detonator, he turned to Lyra. This will end it. The Syndicate will never control the Sanctuary. Lyra's breath came in shallow gasps, but her eyes met his with a silent understanding. Do it. He pressed the button. The explosion was deafening. The ground beneath them trembled as the core exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending debris and fire in all directions. The Syndicate's grip on the data, on the power of the Sanctuary, shattered in that single moment. The escape. Torek, the Black Fang is losing power. Jane's voice rang out in triumph. We've got them on the run. Get to the shuttle. Now. Lyra, still in Torek's arms, felt the world shift as they sprinted toward the exit. The pirates were in disarray, scrambling to respond. But it was too late. The Black Fang's systems were failing. The Syndicate's ship was no longer a threat. Torek's pulse thudded in his ears, but his focus was on Lyra. He would get her out. No one would take her from him. They reached the shuttle's escape ramp, and Jane greeted them with a nod. Took you long enough, she joked, but the relief in her voice was unmistakable. Torek helped Lyra into the shuttle, then climbed in behind her, his body sore from the battle, but his heart unyielding. The doors shut with a hiss, and the shuttle launched into the sky. Above them, the Black Fang was already a distant memory. The pirate ship burned bright in the sky, a blazing fireball of destruction. The promise. The shuttle soared into the quiet space above Ilara Prime. The stars outside were calm, distant, and peaceful. Lyra lay back in her seat, her eyes half closed as Torek sat beside her, his hand resting on hers. You did it, Lyra, Torek said softly. You saved us all. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. I didn't do it alone. Torek smiled, his gaze softening. I'll always be here, always. "I know," she whispered, the weight of the words sinking in. She reached for her necklace, now restored to its rightful place around her neck. "Sanctuary Prime," she murmured. "It's more than just a place. It's hope. For all of us." Torek looked at her, his eyes full of pride. "You're not alone anymore, Lyra. You never will be." Lyra smiled, the faintest glimmer of tears shining in her eyes. For the first time since the destruction of her home, she felt the warmth of a family, of a protector who would never leave her behind. And as they soared into the unknown, one thing was clear. This was just the beginning.